Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we'll be looking at an organizational design assessment of MasTec Advanced Technologies. Today's date is December 9th of 2018. First thing, we'll discuss the background of the report. The report was prepared by David McMurray, Regional Director of Operations. The project timeframe took approximately 7 weeks to complete, and the report was completed with the support of program sponsor Ryan Kemp, who is Regional Vice President of Operations. So why are we doing this report? Well, MasTec is facing a changing environment that requires a shift in strategy. And we know a well-structured organizational design creates synergies across the organization that improve the performance of the organization. So it is important for us to understand and assess what is needed for MasTec to continue to be a leading fulfillment service provider. You may be asking yourself, what is an organizational design assessment? Well, great question. Let me help you understand that. First of all, an organizational design assessment provides a comprehensive framework for diagnosing organizational design. It also provides a point of view that shows how organizational design elements best fit to comprise an effective organizational design. It also demonstrates how imbalance in design components can be crucial for the performance of the organization. And lastly, an organizational design assessment will address the dynamics of design and misfit management. The report is really broken down into 4 key assessment areas. These components that we will be looking at are strategic assessment, which looks at an organization's goals, strategy, and environment. Structural assessment, which looks at MasTec's configuration, geographic distribution, and external agreements. We'll also be taking a look at the coordination assessment, which will look at MasTec's task design, coordination, and control, information systems, and incentives. And lastly, the last design component that we will evaluate within this report is the leadership assessment, which takes a look at MasTec's leadership and organizational climate. Let's take a closer look at what each design component consists of. If we look at strategic assessment, it comprises of 3 organizational design spaces. The first space that we'll look at is the organization's goals. If you're looking at the graph, you'll see that there are 4 columns, A, B, C, and D. Each letter represents a quadrant that MasTec falls in for each organizational design space. When we look at organizational goals, really is determined based off 2 dimensions, and that's going to be efficiency and effectiveness. And as you can see, MasTec falls in quadrant D, which is efficiency and effectiveness. If we look at strategy types, there are 2 dimensions that we diagnose, and that's going to be exploitation and exploration. And as you can see, MasTec falls in column D, which is analyzer without innovation. And lastly, organizational design space number 3 is environment. And here you can see MasTec falls in quadrant B, which is varied. Now you'll notice that some design spaces are highlighted in green and some are in red. The green represents fits with the company's organizational goals and strategies, and the red represents misfits. And essentially, misfits can create inefficiencies within the organization and hurt performance. And here we can see that MasTec is in a varied environment, which is not a fit with quadrant D. As we move into structural assessment, here we'll see that MasTec has 4 design spaces that we'll be looking at. Number 4 is configuration. Configuration has 2 dimensions that we're going to be diagnosing, and that's the functional specialization, product, service, and customer orientation. Also, we'll be looking at the geographic distribution. Optimal sourcing and locally responsive are the 2 dimensions, and as we can see, MasTec fell in quadrant C, which is multi-domestic. We'll also take a look at external agreements, which consists of external activities and external people, and MasTec fell in quadrant B, which is considered an outsourcer. And in organizational design space number 7, task design, Mastech fell in quadrant C, which is fragmented. And as we take a look at the organizational design spaces within the structural assessment, we can see that none of the 4 design spaces fall in quadrant D, and therefore we come away with 4 misfits, which happen to be configuration, multi-domestic, outsourcer, and fragmented. As we move over and take a look at the coordination assessment, we see 4 additional design spaces that were diagnosed. First off, we took a look at people. And people really boiled down to 2 fundamental dimensions, which is the number of people and professionalism. Mastech fell in the office, which is quadrant D. Coordination and control had 2 design dimensions, formalization and decentralization. Mastech fell in quadrant D, considered a clan. Information and knowledge systems had 2 key dimensions, amount of information and the tacit nature of information. And again, Mastech fell in quadrant D, considered relationship driven. And lastly, the incentives, which really took a look at Mastech's targeted incentives and basis of evaluations. And a diagnosis of Mastech's incentives found that the organization fell in quadrant D. Here we see no misfits within the coordination assessment. And lastly, the last part of the report delves into the company's leadership assessment. Here we look at 2 design spaces. The first one is leadership style, and leadership style has 2 key dimensions, uncertainty avoidance and preference for delegation. Here you'll see Mastech fell in quadrant D, which is considered a producer. Organizational climate, which is tension and readiness to change. Here again we can see Mastech fell in column D, which is rational goal. Again, no misfits in the leadership assessment. And lastly, the final part of the report that I hope you all will be reading and taking action on is the recommendations. Here we take a look at each one of the misfits that were previously discussed in each of the design components, and we look at how and what Mastech needs to do to correct those misfits. Currently, there are 5 misfits and 1 fit that could be improved. First thing is strategy type. Now, if you recall, Mastech fell in quadrant D for strategy type, which is an analyzer without innovation. However, because of the changing environment and Mastech's need to innovate, it is recommended that Mastech move from an analyzer without to an analyzer with innovation. Mastech's environment is currently varied, and in order to create a fix, we would need to move to a turbulent. In the assessment, you will see that moving to a turbulent environment is not going to be very difficult because it is imminent due to the change in technology and the turbulent state that our organization is facing, that we must move and adjust in what now is a turbulent environment for our company. Next, we'll see the configuration was a misfit. Here we will look to move from a functional to a matrix. Geographic distribution will move from multi-domestic to a transnational. We recommended from an external agreements standpoint that we move from an outsider to a confederation. And lastly, as we look at task design, it's going to be recommended that we move from fragmented to knotty. And as the report wraps up, there are recommendations and a conclusion that Mastech take action to move these 5 misfits and start to put them into a fitting organization. As we are faced with imminent change and we strive to focus on efficiency and effectiveness, it is imperative that the organization take action and identify what steps need to be taken to move forward and put our organization in a place where we can be more successful. I want to thank you for your time today, and I look forward to your feedback on our organizational design.